everyone, it's Emerus and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to start a brand new series on my channel that will, fill in the gaps while I am working on some realistic roleplay videos for you guys. I do currently have one in the works and it is currently being edited. So the background of this will just be, me training one of my horses that I've got to train in SSO. Currently don't know what one, but they'll just be training in the background while you guys listen to me ramble and watch me train if you're into that sort of thing. So credit for this goes completely to Amelia Dreambell. I loved her series on why the equestrian world scares me, and it really opened up my desire to share the experiences that I had and what made me quit doing hunter jumpers and what really pushed me into doing 3-day eventing and where my love for it came from. So first, we've got to preface this with, I didn't really start riding hardcore until I was 20 and I got my first horse. So I had been riding off and on my mom's horse for a very long time. I wasn't really committed when I was younger. I loved horses, but then again, I loved all animals. So fast forward a little bit, I get Merlin, and I decide, even though I have this very standoffish, unhappy, green broke horse, that he's going to be my jumper. And my mom, who was the one that was really supportive of me in this whole thing, kind of looked at me, she's like, that's going to be a jumper. And I mean, I have to agree with her now, especially considering where he was when we started this. But I was 100% confident, and I said, yeah, he's going to be my jumper. Well, fast forward, several things later, at the barn I'd kept him at for the first few months of my owning him, we transfer to a horse stable. I'm going to try and keep names out of this, just because they are still local, and they still have contact with me, though they don't reach out, I don't reach out. This is just my experiences with this individual, and why I really don't like hunters anymore. So we moved to this stable, and I find out that there is a trainer there. Now, I'd emailed a couple of times before because initially I was looking to get both my horse and my mom's horse in the same place so we could ride together. Like, that was the whole point of us getting my horse. And in the end, moved there, and a couple months later I would watch their lessons. And I really had blinders on in the beginning of this. No matter what people tried to tell me, I argued and I ignored it, but I really had blinders on, right? And I'd see her doing these jumping lessons with her students, and I was like, I want to do that. I can finally do that with Merlin. Well, I have my first lesson, and big first red flag. I didn't even meet the head trainer for this program. My first lesson. I did not meet her. I had no idea who she was. I had a lesson with one of her assistant students. We'll call her Haley. Haley fits, I guess. And Haley was super nice. I really enjoyed my lesson with her. I had lost so much of my strength in my riding because I had been dealing with excess weight gain, and I mean, it's still something that I really fight with as an equestrian. We'll get more into that a little bit later. And I really for one, fell in love with this lesson horse that I was on. He was so patient with me. Because of my weight gain, I had a really, really hard time being confident when getting on the horse, just because I had outgrown my mom's horse. And for the longest time, I had been able to ride him, and then it got to the point where he couldn't even move me on his back, and that just broke me, which, again, led me to getting my own horse and, taking these lessons, because I wanted to learn. And so I had my first lesson with her. It was just learning walk trot, and I loved it. Now, I don't know why back then I didn't think it was sketchy that I hadn't met the actual owner, but I think it was probably because I had assumed that the girl that was working with me was in fact the person that owned it. And I got signed up with Haley to have my next lesson later on, and that was that. So I had, I believe, a total of 2 lessons with Haley before something happened between Haley and the head trainer, and Haley was kicked out. And that is when I met my current trainer that I work with, although she is not like local to me. She is still in my state, and I work with her off and on, and we go down the cross country course and everything. More about her later, and we'll come up with a name for her. Haley leaves, and I start taking, lessons. I'm pretty sure it was once or twice a week with this other trainer, and I loved it. I got really close to her, and I really started enjoying myself, got to meet her horse. And then I finally started taking, it wasn't so much one-on-one lessons anymore. I was in with a group of others. Now, because of my excess weight, I really struggled with my balance. Out of everyone I knew that went into her program from the beginning compared to me, they did not have to work as hard as I did, because I had so much extra weight bearing down on me and on the horse, and I was so self-conscious of, hurting the horse. And so I would struggle to keep going, and I would struggle with, just my overall confidence in riding. And then, after a while, I finally, shocker, met the owner. Now, we'll call her, trying to think of a random name here. We'll call her Allie, I guess. Allie is going to be the name of our head trainer for this. So, the first time I had ever met Allie, ironically, had been while she was working with a client's horse. I had been going to turn Merlin and his buddy at the time, our friend's horse, out to the field. And he'd gone out with those horses before. Nothing happened. I didn't even know they were, her client's horses. And I went to turn him out, and she yells at me and my mom from the arena while she's on this person's horse. And, I get the whole, legality of it. You've got another person's horse in your care and everything. And she got really snippy. So we turned him out in the other arena. And that was really, the first time I think I saw just how much of a jerk she was. And for some reason, I was still blind to it, and I still ended up taking lessons. Well, fast forward, I get in contact with Allie, and I start, taking, consistent lessons. And then I finally talked to her and was like, hey, so what do I have to do to be able to ride my own horse in these lessons? Since I want to do this with my horse, I don't want to do this with lesson horses. I want to learn with him. Well, the first thing, especially now that I'm talking over this and thinking back on this, the first thing that really stood out as weird was the fact that I had to put him in training with her for $350 a month. And that would give me one lesson on my own horse. And I somehow wasn't allowed to ride him whenever I wanted anymore. It was on her schedule while she, quote unquote, trained him twice a week. So I wasn't allowed to have, any free rides on my horse. I had to ask permission for my horse that I bought before I knew this trainer. So I still don't know why. It still bothers me that I didn't realize this sooner. But I digress. And I was like, okay, well, he's got some quirks. Now, after I bought him, he had a bruised tongue from a trial buyer who bruised his mouth. And I was like, hey, look, can he be ridden bitless? We had a hackamore for him that would fit. And she was like, no, I make them ride in the snaffle, or I go harsher bits. And I was like, okay, just know that he, he'll run through your hands. He's very green and everything. And he has a perpetual fear of lunge whips. Now, even today, he still does not like them. Merlin is very uncomfortable and very tense around them. We've gotten him mostly desensitized to them, but he just, they're not his thing. I have an easier time lunging him, which is vocal commands in my hands, pointing, clicking, that whole thing. That works so much better for him than than, the lunge whip. And I still have these videos of the first time she worked with him. And he did flinch. Like, there's videos of him flinching while she's, flicking the lunge whip around, but you can just... Merlin was not the ideal jumper. Like, he was the exact opposite of what this trainer would have gone for. For one, he was not a thoroughbred. We don't know what he is. We think he's some kind of Morgan cross. We think it's thoroughbred, but then again, he surprises us every single time we go out to see him. We're like, are we sure this is thoroughbred or is this something else? But first time I'm out there and I get to see her ride him. He was like shaking his head and like chomping at the bit and like flicking his lips in like the most uncomfortable way I had ever seen. He was very like head high. He did not know how to drop his head and engage himself. He had the worst muscle definition. And I mean, there were points because he was green and he didn't know that she would just get so angry with him that she'd like yank up on his face and really get up in his business. And he would get so angry. He would, he'd throw his head and he'd never buck, which is surprising to me. That didn't happen until later on. And it blew my mind how hard she was being with him. Now, I knew getting him that he was really pushy. Like, he would push into you. He would try and charge at you after you fed him. There were boundaries that he needed, and we'd slowly start working on that. Fast forward a couple years. Actually, no. Fast forward a couple months. I'd been riding pretty consistently, and we'd finally gotten to a point where Merlin was starting to do better. I was starting to, have the strength to hold myself up, not have as many issues with, falling forward, losing my balance, all that sort of thing. And I worked my butt off for it. Now, keep in mind, at the same time as I was doing this, I was currently unemployed. The job that I had applied for before getting Merlin had fallen through literally the day that I had paid for him and he was due to come down to me. And I got the ability to clean stalls at the barn where I was boarding. So all the money that I made, it was $2 to clean a stall. Now, looking back on it, that was completely ridiculous with the drama related to that. But $2 per stall that I would clean. And at the end of the month, I would have just enough to pay for my board. And for me, it was worth it. Because I was getting the physical activity in, and, I was doing something to, like, fight to keep my horse. And it felt good. It felt great. I mean, I was getting physically stronger, and it was helping with my riding. Well, there was a point where the barn manager, now I'm not afraid to say his name because he is no longer there. We don't know what happened to him, especially after I left. His name was Ray. Now, Ray had this habit of really, really talking down to women. It didn't matter who you were. He would talk down to you, like he always knew better than you. And that day, because one of the other girls that was supposed to clean stalls had flaked out, I got saddled with more stalls than was on my normal, book schedule. I normally did 12 stalls a day, and I would come in first thing in the morning and try and get at least, the first quarter of it done. I'd try and get at least 9 done before my lesson. So I only had a few left after my riding lesson, and then I could finish those up, and then I could go home and shower, because I was constantly smelling like ammonia. Because the upkeep in there was terrible no matter what I did with, like, new shavings and cleaning it out, scraping it out perfectly. The wood was rotten, so the ammonia and everything was just soaking into the wood boards, and it was terrible. Oh, it stunk. And I had gotten done late because my normal 12 stalls on a Friday had turned into 20 stalls. And I had gotten there super, super early to take care of those stalls and get as many done as I could before my lesson. Well, because he threw them on me at the last minute before my lesson, and I had told him, look, I have a riding lesson. I need to go take care of this. He had forced me to get done a couple extra stalls that I normally would have before my lesson, which, as a result, made me late. Now, I knew exactly what time my lesson was at, and I had 10 minutes to tack up my horse and get him ready. that wasn't a problem. I knew where all my tack was. I had all my stuff. Merlin's stuff was kept separate from all the other lesson horses, so that wasn't a problem. I got my stuff together, and I started tacking him up as quickly as I could. Just as I finished tightening his girth, and I was about to get his bridle on, I got a phone call. On the other end of the line is Allie, and she lays into me. And Allie is sitting there complaining that my lesson time, I'm supposed to be in the arena early. I should already be in the arena, warmed up, and on my horse before my lesson time so that we can get started and work on stuff. This was my first time having a lesson with Allie, the head trainer. And I was like, she knew I worked there and cleaned stalls. Heck, she saw me cleaning the stalls of her horses. So she knew full well that I was doing this. And I was like, I'm sorry, Ray threw some extra stuff at me and I'm just about tacked up. I gotta tell you, she would not let it go. She was furious at me. I was completely terrified because I was the newbie, if you will. Like, I was the new girl. She already had all this, close, tight-knit relationship with everybody, and I wanted so badly to please my trainer because I knew they had a show team, and it had always been my dream to show. Now, I was disappointed because it wasn't show jumping. Like, it had been, portrayed online that it was show jumping and not hunter jumpers. So, there was a disappointment there, but all my brain could see was the fact that I was going to learn to jump, and I was ecstatic. Now, after that lesson and how hard she was on me from being late, I was never late to another lesson. She would get mad at me for being too early. And it was like, that balancing act was impossible to keep up with. And I would work my butt off every lesson just to please my trainer. It wasn't even about whether or not I was riding well enough. It was just to get her approval. It finally got to the point where I wanted so badly to please my trainer that I started, bringing separate riding clothes than the clothes I was cleaning stalls in. Like, I was over preparing for these lessons because I wanted to be, I wanted to get the praise that I saw her give all these other girls. And then after, for once, a really good lesson on Merlin, now keep in mind that I had gotten bucked off of Merlin. I'd never been bucked off a horse before. He threw me into a round pen panel and he bronked. And I hadn't been on him in, months. But by the time this phone call happened and everything, and I'd been, working for a while with the other trainer and taking lessons, Allie was the one that got me back on Merlin and, got my confidence back. Well, because we'd had such a good lesson and my balance was improving and everything, I still have these videos. And I still cringe at myself watching myself ride. But I was so proud. She was so proud of me for once. And I finally told her after, the lesson went really well and everything, I looked at her and was like, I would really, really like to, start working hard enough to try out for the show team. The only thing I was planning on doing with Merlin at the beginning, because he'd only jumped once with the other trainer. Yeah, it was confusing. We'll get to the other trainer later, because she's in a different one, because she's a very huge part of, my riding and everything. And I worked my butt off, and I was like, I would like to try and prep me and Merlin to compete with you guys. And I was just thinking of doing under saddle classes, because Merlin needed, his flat work built up more so than I was worried about him jumping. And after that lesson, she was like, you know what? okay, we'll start pushing you to, join the team and see how it goes. I was ecstatic. Then disaster strikes. It had turned a year. A year goes by of me owning Merlin. We had come so far together. He was finally trusting me. He finally, cared that I was around. He wanted to spend time with me. I got to see more of his personality. But there was still that, he's still very reserved with, people being around, affection. Still wasn't really keen on it, but I mean, he was far more relaxed than when we had started. And then I'd gotten a job at a craft supply store, and I was so relieved because it would mean affording my lessons and everything would be so much easier, and a lot of weight would be taken off me. Then I get the text that broke my heart. I got a text that Merlin was lame just after getting approved to get this job. I was devastated. It was 5 days, I believe? 3 days? I think it was 3 days. 3 to 5 days after we'd just been cleared to start trying out for the show team, he gets hurt. And I prepared myself for the worst. Now, that same night that I found out that he had been hurt, I had a riding lesson that I was supposed to attend on him. Well, time for, I got to the barn and I go see him, and she was supposed to be taking him out for, schooling. I guess he was supposed to jump or something, or jump or flat work or something, and his stifle is swollen. He had been kicked by another horse in the field, a horse that I had previously requested him not be turned out with because she was showing signs of aggression in the stall with him, and I was really upset. And that night, went home, and my trainer was kind enough to take him to the vet for me because I didn't have a trailer or anything, and I got a phone call from her because she'd gone down when she took him down to her vet and everything, and she was like, I don't want to tell you the news over the phone. I want you to come down and, talk to the vet yourself. And I was preparing myself for the worst because I know leg injuries in horses are always career ending and everything. And I found out, looking at the x-rays, his stifle was fractured. I was crushed. And I spent so long, rehabbing him by hand walking, hand grazing, just 15 minutes. That was all he could do. My horse that went from being worked almost 5 times a week and turnout in between went from 100 to 0 with box rest. He went insane. He was sometimes so hard to deal with. Well, fast forward a little bit, and I start noticing while he's on box rest and I start taking lessons on these other horses, I start noticing some things that really concern me, and it was the fact that almost every single horse, every week, there were at least 3 horses that would come up lame. It was always an excuse, oh, it's their shoes. Mind you, she did not do anything for proper foot care. And I couldn't say anything because I didn't know how to, express what I was seeing, and I didn't understand why someone would, so poorly take care of their horse. And it was just constant. Horses constantly being hurt, constantly lame, constantly throwing shoes. And I still was so blind to all of it. The way she was treating my horse, how she was treating other people's horses. It was just mind-boggling. I mean, I cannot believe myself. Even now, it bothers me. Then finally, she moves due to, drama with the current owners of the stable she was staying at. And she gets her own place. And at the time, things were going well. I was leasing a horse. I was leasing their Haflinger mare. And she was really my saving grace while Merlin was hurt. Because I learned to canter on her. I'd never gotten to canter Merlin before he got hurt. I got to canter her. I got to learn to jump on her. And she was really the one horse that really kept me going because I wanted to quit. I thought I was going to have to put him down because she didn't listen to me. And of course she'd called me and did the whole manipulation of, oh, I've been through it, I know how it feels. And mind you, the worst part of this is not 2 days earlier, the other trainer that I said was important, so there are 3 of them, head trainer, assistant trainer, working student. I was usually taking lessons with a working student. Now, the assistant trainer had lost her horse in a freak accident in the field. He had broken his leg clean through his hide. It was devastating to see. And what's weirder is it was a week earlier. We lost one of the lesson horses. She was this little Arabian mare and she got impact colic. I could not believe the string of luck. It literally came in 3s. And it was aggravating. Well, fast forward, moved to this new barn. And I was paying $500 for my horse to be kept in a pen outside with crappy cover. And for him to constantly be picked on by this gigantic draft. He was always covered in, marks on his neck, pulled off, like he had hair ripped off of his neck, he had chunks taken out of him, and I was just furious. And this is like minimal for what happened over there, and I still cannot believe a lot of this actually happened. But I think it is about time that I wrap this up, and we will continue this in a part 2 of why I quit Hunter Jumpers a little bit later. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing me rant about my trainer, and I hope you guys are ready to hear about all the other things that I went through after we moved to her new place, and a couple of stories that I left out from the barn I met her at. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening, and thank you for watching. If you were watching me train this whole time, you guys are complete rock stars for listening to me ramble for almost 30 minutes. This is your Vic Switcher signing off, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!